Esther Lopez.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning.
Serena Harper.
Good morning.
Nancy Lowry's floating around in the back. And I am Ernesto Gamboa, so again, welcome. We'd like to first start off with a short video on the Hub, our venue sponsor where we're located this morning, to tell people what the Hub is all about.
My name is Dana, and I like to talk about
Good coffee. My pack.
Oh, sorry, that's the video for 1 million cups.
That looks like the
That looks
like just 405 right there.
Oh, is that not?
Premium coffee.
I am.
Okay, I don't know which one.
Started. My business is ready to launch. It's hard.
Okay, so that's where we are right now, the hub of human innovation. We are a business and technology incubator. So if you're starting a company or growing a company, particularly with a new product and new technology, come see us, we can help you. Next, I want to talk about our media-sponsored Digital Bull. They're normally here with us live streaming this event. Unfortunately today, for the first time in months, they couldn't be here because they had a bigger event in Juarez, they said, so they're not here. But please do go on the website, the Facebook, and share the videos, like them. They will be back next week live streaming, so I'd like to make that announcement with Digital Bull and Borderland TV. And then now we do have a video on the Kauffman Foundation's 1 Million Cups.
Is a weekly educational program developed by.
I think our cast stopped. You want to reload the cast? Oh, technical difficulties. So, I'll talk. The 1 Million Cups program that we're doing here today was started by the Kauffman Foundation. It's an entrepreneurial networking event. Most weeks, almost every week, we bring in 2 entrepreneurs to tell us their story, their entrepreneurial journey, their trials, their tribulations, their successes. And then the real value add for them and all of you, the audience, is you get to ask them questions for 15 minutes. And that's when they really get valuable feedback. You get to challenge their ideas and their assumptions. And every entrepreneur who's presented said, hey, I got such great feedback from the audience. There is a mobile app that you can download, 1millioncups.org/El Paso. Please download the app, please do check in. And you can also provide feedback to the presenters on the app. And I think are we ready with the video now? Try it. Yes. It's up. No sound? Let's just skip the video. So that's what 1 Million Cups is all about. It's a good thing I know how to improvise, right? So with that, I'd like to bring up Joe Wardy, the President and CEO of the Hub of Human Innovation, to introduce our special guest today.
Good morning, everybody. Okay, this is a real honor for me because I've known our special guest today since he first graduated from UTEP, and I've seen him rise in his professional career. So he's a product of El Paso, and we're really proud of him. So, Miguel Gamiño Jr. is Chief Technology Officer for the City of New York. As a technology entrepreneur, he founded 2 IT companies in El Paso, Beret Systems and Sonisa. So, as CTO, he is charged with driving major city initiatives, including developing a meaningful and innovative smart city and Internet of Things strategy, and leading the city's broadband program aimed at fulfilling Mayor de Blasio's promise to provide every New Yorker and New York City business access to affordable, reliable, high-speed broadband service by 2025. Prior to New York City, Miguel served as the City Chief Information Officer and Executive Director, Department of Technology for the City and County of San Francisco. Now in San Francisco, his team and colleagues accomplished key technology-focused initiatives Among the most important was bringing broadband to the mainstream conversation and charting the course for a connected city of the future. As an industry technologist, Miguel proactively leads and participates in thought leadership and influencer conversations with colleagues from around the world, emphasizing the significance of pervasive broadband connectivity and the value of disrupting civic services through digital transformation. Now, he served on the Intergovernmental Advisory Committee of the Federal Communications Commission on behalf of San Francisco's Mayor Edwin Lee. He's a founding member of the Connected City Advisory Board and a founding member of the Council of Global City CIOs. Miguel maintains a continuous and active speaking schedule, having participated at major global technology events such as the Dreamforce, Smart City Expo World Congress, Open World, Wireless Broadband Alliance Wi-Fi Global Congress, IoTX Dubai, Silicon Valley Music and Technology Festival, and Industry CIO Summits, evangelizing the growing importance of connectivity for global denizens and its evolutionary impact on civilization. Hey, I got it all out there. Sorry, one more paragraph. He's a proud recipient of the 2017 High-Tech 100, 2016 State IT Executive of the Year, 2016 Top 25 Doers, Dreamers and Drivers, and 2016 Top 21 Inspiring CIOs on Twitter, 2015 CIO 100 Award from CIO Magazine, and Top 20 Social CIO by Forbes Magazine, and Top 100 Social CIOs by Huffington Post in 2015 and 2016. Many of you don't know that he did serve as the Chief Information and Innovation Officer and Director of the Department of Information Technology Services for the city of El Paso. More importantly, he's one of ours. And he's never forgotten his roots in El Paso. I know he's here to receive a very prestigious award from the university. He's been here for 10 days, but I just know him as Miguel. Miguel, welcome.
So one takeaway for sure, we need to give a shorter bio. Thank you, Joe. A couple things, believe it or not, that were not mentioned in that monologue were that Joe actually played a really important role in my trajectory. He might not know it or realize it, but for a couple reasons. One, I did meet him fresh out of school, ears still wet, not really knowing what I was doing, and he was always very gracious with his advice, which is something that I think is really important in this whole conversation. But secondly, when he was mayor, somehow, I don't know, he must have not gotten a full night's rest the night before, but he decided it was a good idea to ask me to be the first chair of the IT Advisory Committee for the city of El Paso, which was significant for a couple reasons. One, first mayor in my knowledge to prioritize technology that way for El Paso. So, kudos. But secondly, he planted a seed that later would kind of surprise me and grow into an oak tree, which is this calling to public service. I didn't realize how important that would become to me in the future. So this is a very special moment for me to come back and share some time with you. So thank you, Joe. Mayor. So he's actually the first mayor I worked for. But I did grow up estilo El Paso. I grew up on the canal banks of the Upper Valley, and I say that just to say I wasn't in the certain part of the Upper Valley, but nothing wrong with that. But I grew up in a place that was in close proximity to people who just lived a different lifestyle than me. And I didn't realize it really growing up, but later in life I think that has left an imprint that has been a positive impact on what I've done going forward. For those of you, in El Paso, everyone wants to know what high school you went to, right? I went to Coronado. I got kicked out of Coronado. Yeah, true story. Principal Watley, thank you. And then I graduated from Haynes, somehow. And all of that just to say, I think what I've been trying to figure out, and part of me coming back here accepting the award is a great honor at UTEP, but we're working on some significant ideas to think about how to change the conversation that's happening with young people and their belief of what they can and should become and do with their lives, in particular with respect to technology. I'll get into more philosophy on that in a second, but I think in a bunch of these conversations and meetings at UTEP and with other people, and I'm kind of like walking down memory lane a few different ways and different angles, I remember having some teachers and some people along the way that were very supportive, but I remember a bunch that weren't. I remember a bunch that told me, since we're all friends, you know, just kidding. I remember one teacher in middle school at Lincoln who told me and my friend that we would be lucky to end up in jail because then we wouldn't end up dead. This is a true story. And the reason I say it is because by some grace of God or karma or whatever it is you believe in, I used that, I transformed that into motivation and not discouragement. But I think we have to think really carefully about how we are talking to young people and motivating them or not. And so, I don't remember her name, but I hope she's watching today too. Because I didn't end up in jail or dead. And so I think that is something that I've come back full circle to try to figure out how we can change that conversation. We can not leave it to chance that young people find their way. We need to really think more specifically about the value and the importance of mentorship, going back to my first comment about Joe. Joe was one of those people that was always encouraging. He gave me some stern advice a couple times, which I needed, but it was always in a way that was pushing me in the right direction. And I think we need to construct a way to make sure that our community does that on purpose more often, and not just by chance that I happened to meet Joe, and Joe happened to be a great guy, and I happened to end up with this supportive relationship. We need to figure out how to structure it. So, kind of jumping forward, my call to action to everyone in this room is find a young person, whether you think they need your help or not, and find a way to provide them with support and advice. You might not think you have much to offer to them, but I guarantee you that it will be valuable. And so I went to UTEP. I graduated accounting and CIS. Funny story there. Another kind of story of supportive inspiration. I kind of, continuing my high school theme, I was not a morning person. And so my first accounting class, Principles 1, was at 7 a.m. You know where this is going. I rarely showed up. In fact, I think I only showed up for exams. But I was doing really well. I was passing exams. I studied at home. I did whatever I had to do. I was an entrepreneur before I knew it. I figured out how to hustle, and I got it done. But in a different choice as an instructor than I experienced in middle school, the instructor at UTEP came to me and said, you have I don't think she used the word gift, but you have an inclination for accounting. So I won't drop you for attendance if you give it a chance as a major. I'm an entrepreneur, aka negotiator, right? So that sounded good to me. I started showing up to class a little more than I did before, and I passed, and I went on and I continued and I finished with an accounting degree because that professor made a different choice. Same kind of situation. I was acting out, or I wasn't fitting the norm, I wasn't following the rules, but she saw the opportunity, right, not the troublemaker, and significantly affected my trajectory also. And all of that, I think, growing up in El Paso and all those life experiences certainly have impressed upon me a certain way of being and a culture. I try really hard to reach out and participate in things that I think might be helpful, much to the detriment of my personal schedule and personal life, but I think it's worth it. I think it's really important. I wish I had more of it. I wish I had done it better as I was coming up to seek out more and more mentorship. So as Joe mentioned, I did start 2 technology companies. One of them still operates here in El Paso, the other does not, but they were both, you know, I guess successful by some measure. Bunch of lessons there. And I know the spirit of this is some entrepreneurial lessons, but frankly, we need to order pizza or something to get through all of that. What I tell you is it's along the same thread. I think it's aligning yourself with people who believe in what you're doing and have similar culture and values and interest in what you're trying to accomplish. Different technical skills is super important, but similar persona and similar values is absolutely critical, hands down. And there's probably people in this audience who have been in partnerships that went south, and if you dial it back and think about it, it's probably more about a difference in opinion on the value statement than it is, you know, I want to build the widget blue and you want to build it red. So my number one takeaway, my number one lesson is, as an investor or as an entrepreneur, partner, founder, is who you do business with is as important as what business you're doing, or what technology you're building, or product you're selling, or what innovation you think you're creating. The people that you align yourself with is hands down the number one most important thing, in my opinion. And I've learned some of that post-founder. I have the benefit now, largely because of my time in San Francisco and now New York, to engage with a bunch of investors, right? And there are some investors who will put big dollars on a person before they've ever seen a patent. And that was a really an eye-opening sort of discovery for me, was how those people who had done really well and made really good bets were consistently betting on people and less often betting on the specifics of a technology. So I think that's really the core essence of all of this. One of the things that I'm really proud of at Beret, we actually built what was maybe one of the world's first cloud services. We didn't call it cloud because I wasn't a marketer, and I didn't come up with a really cool term like that. So our product description was hosted managed service. Rolls off the tongue. But what we did was we took technology, we put it in a data center, and we transformed it a little bit so that we could provide it as a multi-tenant service. Multiple small businesses could come in and consume this enterprise class system for a fraction of the cost, because they were only paying for their sliver. And that's ultimately what has become the essence of cloud service, right? It's all about monetizing, but for the purpose of democratizing access to this technology. And very truly, it was principled for me. It wasn't about, honestly, it wasn't even about making money. It was about, I felt like I had figured out a way to give small and medium-sized businesses and nonprofits who could previously not afford this enterprise class technology. I had, the big moment for me was I had discovered a way to make that available to them. I hadn't even really thought about how I was monetizing multiple times over one investment. That's the accountant in me should have been figuring that out. But I was really focused on the equity component, the fact that I was making this technology accessible to businesses who might not otherwise have ever been able to afford it. So I felt like I was influencing a leveling of the playing field, which was really important in El Paso, because SMB is is the bread and butter, not just of El Paso, but of America, frankly. But in El Paso in particular, that's what I saw when I looked around. And so I thought, how can I take this multi-million-dollar system that no small law office or doctor's office or accounting firm or any of the small type businesses that were in El Paso would ever be able to plunk down $1 million to have this. So they were always relegated to using something second tier. And so that was our big, I think, contribution. From what I understand, I think Beret is still running the system that we built 15 years ago. Might even still have customers on that same system that I built 15 years ago. I'm obviously no longer there, but I'm proud that the company still is, and I'm proud that the company is still employing people in El Paso and providing an important service to businesses in El Paso. The other little known fact about Veray was that the way I started the business was through an internship program at UTEP. So I had to figure out how, with very little capital, to build a business that was intended to scale, and I needed human capital, I needed talent, but I didn't have the money to like prepay. Right? I couldn't just put down a couple $1 million and hire a big staff and then wait for the customers to come on. I had to find a way to ease up on it, but have the talent kind of warmed up, right? And another person near and dear to my heart, who I have the joy of seeing several times this week, is Dean Nachman at the College of Business at UTEP. And I went to him with this other crazy idea, and I said, hey, let's start an internship program here, and people can come to Veray for a few hours a week, and I'll pay for their credit hours. And then we'll put those students in a competition, and the winner of the kind of the highest performer would be the leader for the next cohort, and that leader will give them a full ride to UTEP and pay them. And there was a bunch of other details in it, but the idea was that we could create something that would kind of continue forever. So because a few people near and dear to my heart entertained my crazy ideas in El Paso, we did that at the College of Business. And it became, in its little moment, a fairly sought-after internship program at UTEP. I would go speak sometimes at UTEP or meet with students, and they're like, how do I get into the Veray thing? And we actually, the plan, like I said, was to take the highest performer out of the first team, hire that person, and have them run the next cohort, and kind of scale it like that. We grew so fast, we hired all 5. And I keep in touch with all 5 of those, more or less, over social media and other means to this day. So not only did that set up the ability for us to go confidently building the business and selling the service, but also being able to source the talent actively. And we hired cohort and cohort after that. But we also built really strong relationships because, back to my earlier point, we found not only people who were talented at UTEP, but people who were like-minded in what we were trying to achieve. And Veray was everything that a startup, like the stereotypes of startups were, it was there. I was known to, I don't say this in a proud way necessarily, because I don't think this is healthy, but I was known to have people leave for the evening and come back and find me still there in the same clothes. And I wasn't the only one. We worked harder than I ever worked in my life, and had the most fun doing it that I've ever had in my life. We killed a couple cases of Dr. Pepper pretty consistently, but we were, in our world, in our mind, we were changing the world in our way. And you saw that develop, and we were onto something. And now cloud service is something we all take for granted. In fact, Amazon has used the concept of cloud to become depending on what the market's doing today, possibly the most valuable company, number 1 or number 2 on earth. Unfortunately, I'm not Bezos, and we didn't build Amazon. But the point is, we were just as creative, and we were just as innovative right here in downtown El Paso, produced right out of it. So that's, I think, one of the takeaways too, is we need to think about, I've had a bunch of conversations this week also about El Paso and what we think of ourselves and how we market ourselves or don't market ourselves. And I think I'm preaching to the choir probably, because the reason you're here is because you probably believe like I do. But there's a bunch of people that aren't here today that need to hear it from you. That El Paso is just as competitive, just as talented, and has just as much opportunity as any place on earth. In fact, in a lot of ways, much more. I have a colleague here with me. He didn't know I was going to call him out, so he's pretending like he's not hearing me. But Jeremy Goldberg, back here, raise your hand. Worked with me in San Francisco and works with me in New York, and heads up what I'll talk about in a second, our disruptive innovation program, our moonshot program in New York City. And I convinced them to come check out El Paso, And he's been here for 16 hours, something like that. And he's already collected a notebook full of stories that he never thought he would have heard about a city like El Paso. And that's the point, is we have to be better about sharing that and believing in ourselves and building a future. So what I did, I also, click. I also don't think that you have to necessarily stay here to contribute here. And that might be a little provocative to some of the people who get really tied up in the brain drain conversation. Because I firmly believe that I'm now in a position to contribute more to El Paso because of what I've done since I've left than I ever could have done had I stayed. Some people have to stay and some people have to go, but we all have to stay connected. And that's the bottom line. We all have to remember where we came from and make contributions to it. So I did not found Google. Although I wish I had. I wish I had. If that were the case, there'd be a Google building downtown. So what I was going to talk about is my after that entrepreneur life. What did happen was there we go. I don't think this works. There we go, right there. So I learned a lot as an entrepreneur. I believed in the notion of broadband connectivity. In fact, one of the things I did when I was at Beret was significantly participate in, kind of sponsor the deployment of broadband in Segundo Barrio, because we believed even back then that access to the internet, access to participating in modern society was the pathway to prosperity and opportunity. That was 2003, I think. Maybe one of the first public Wi-Fi networks on Earth. There's a consistent theme here, right? And then moving into the future, we actually, when Mayor Wardy was mayor, we deployed significant broadband at El Paso International Airport. And that was a big step forward. There wasn't an obvious common thing in airports around the country, much less in cities the size of El Paso. And so we were consistently leading that. And the point of that story is all along the way, I kept having this like internal drumbeat that there was an opportunity we had through technology to give people access to one another, access to the internet, access to participate in the future. And it wasn't conscious for me though. Now I look back and I can say, oh yeah, back when I was at Beret, when I was at Sonisa, when I was at the city of El Paso, etc., that was a common theme. But it wasn't super obvious to me. And then some very fortunate thing happened. I was convinced by then city manager Joyce Wilson to do my civic duty in an official, in a formal way. Take a city badge, show up full time, and make a contribution. And I have to also, because we're all friends here, disclose to you, I was super pessimistic. I believed that in all of the stereotypes of public servant, government workers, I'm like, Joyce, you don't understand. I'm an entrepreneur. I don't work 8 to 5. We already talked about that. I work 12 to 12 sometimes if I have to, and then I work 0 hours some days if I feel like it, right? That's just that's the give and take of that life that you live. I don't work 8 to 5. I don't wear suits and ties anymore. This is dressed up, I did this for you. Tucked in my shirt, and I put on a jacket and a pocket square for you. And she said, and you know, I was like, I would offer up this reason why it didn't make sense, this reason it didn't make sense. I said, listen, I know the mayor, I'm friendly with the mayor. I know a bunch of city council people, I'm friendly with them. I don't want to make them enemies, it doesn't serve me. Because all I'm going to do is come in and shake trees and get frustrated and frustrate other people and then quit. And I don't want to do that to you. And to her credit, again, another moment of like, it could have gone either way. She said, and I don't know if this is public, so Hi, Joyce. She said, listen, come in, and if you stay 1 month or 10 years, we think you'll make a contribution. So she took the pressure off of me. And it was a stroke of genius. She also was like the negotiator. I couldn't say, how do I say no to that, right? And so I did it. And I publicly thank her every single time I have an interview it's in GovTech magazine and several other things. When they've asked me about my entry into public service, I credit her for giving me no choice but to say yes. And the reason I thank her is because I discovered it opened a new chamber of my brain. All those stereotypes went away. I went into an IT department full of wickedly talented people who were just not really well led, really well supported, and not necessarily from council or the mayor, but just the organization itself didn't really know how to deal with technology well. It didn't know how to deal with the risk that comes with that. But these people were there and they were passionate about what they did. Most of them had that job because they wanted that job, not because they couldn't get one elsewhere. And it really impressed upon me something. And so I went into that with Joyce thinking of it as a project. I was going to go in, I was going to turn around the IT department, and then I was going to like leave, and go start another business or do something else or whatever. That was almost 7 years ago. And I'm still on this public service, public sector chapter, which was supposed to be a temporary chapter. And it's been an amazing ride, mostly because it made me realize, it surfaced for me, it made it obvious to me what that drumbeat was that I had all along that I didn't fully understand, which was a matter of using technology to positively impact people's lives and their trajectory. And so I learned a lot about that at the city of El Paso. I was there, I was the CIO there for 2.5 years. Just some stats. The reason these stats are semi-important is just for context, as you see the contrast between El Paso, San Francisco, and New York in terms of scale. But the mission was the same. We wanted to connect people to the internet. We wanted to optimize the way government operated through use of technology and innovation. Joyce was super fixated on making the government operate better, which I think we made. When I went to San Francisco and I told people what I did in El Paso, they're like, yeah, so like, tell me a project you did. Well, we implemented PeopleSoft, we redesigned the fiber network, oh, we imploded City Hall and built a ballpark, which I don't know if you guys like it, I love it. But we redesigned the whole fiber network to accommodate that. We built we renovated a dilapidated building downtown that I took Jeremy for a tour of, which is now one of the most fantastic buildings downtown, the Mulligan Building, where the IT department sits today. That was a gem. We implemented a bunch of stuff. I could on and on, and they're like, yeah, you're lying. You can't do that in government. How long were you there? 22 years, you said? I said, no, 2.5 years. Didn't believe me, and I credit that. And I still, to this day, which I give a lot of credit to Mayor Wardy and Joyce, but I think at its time, I can't speak for today because I don't know how it's going today, but when I was there, the city of El Paso was had run as closely to a well-run business as I think a government possibly can be. And so that's something that also the media, I don't think, talk about. You all should be proud of what that government did for you. They were super efficient. And I can tell you, by context, having gone to San Francisco and New York, how lean and mean this organization is something to be very aware of and proud of. So when you see your elected officials, most of your elected officials, give them a high five and tell them I sent you. Then I got this random call one day from the IT department in San Francisco, and they said, they left a message, IT department in San Francisco. So I called back, thinking they wanted to know. I was getting a bunch of calls at that time for like references on PeopleSoft and projects we were doing, so I thought that's what it was. And it was a headhunter. They asked me to consider putting my name in for the CIO job in San Francisco. And at that time, I had said there were only 3 cities that I would entertain. I told myself this in my head. And San Francisco was one of them. So lo and behold, they called, put my name in. Long story short, I get selected. and I ended up serving as the CIO for the city and county of San Francisco. It's a combined entity there. And I was there for 3.5 years. Again, just the stats to give you some sense of scale. El Paso City was about 6,000 employees when I was here. City and County of San Francisco was about 36,000 when I was there, and a $9 billion citywide budget. And my department alone had a $120 million budget. What was the budget here? The budget here was a little less than $1 billion. Joe probably was better than I. It was. I remember, like, we would kind of quote that it was almost $1 billion budget in El Paso, and about 30 million on top. So I get to San Francisco, and what was really interesting there was I discovered the diversity conversation. The big aha moment for me as a human was I had the benefit of growing up in El Paso, where frankly we never talked about it. Mostly because you look around the room and it's just always diverse, by the definition, right? People from all walks of life, people from all ethnicities, gender diversity, it's all here right now in this room. So I grew up my whole life on the canal banks and in the public school system and at UTEP, never really thinking, even when I had my startup, we were all minorities. Or we had, in that first cohort of 5, 2 of them were women from UTEP. It was not a conscious thing, we just did it. And then I get to San Francisco and there's like this hot debate about the need for diversity. I'm like, why is this a problem? And so I grew up, that's the kind of the theme of this, is every step I took, I grew another layer, right? And that's the layer I grew in San Francisco, was this recognition that the rest of the world doesn't enjoy what we do here in El Paso. I was discriminated against in San Francisco for ethnically for the first time in my life. I was discriminated against in El Paso because I was always too young for the room I was supposed to be in. It was the first time I had really experienced that and started to really understand the diversity problem and the issue. And then I started paying closer attention to the boards or the leadership of these really big tech companies, and they were all white dudes. And I was like, why is this the case? And then I looked at like the students that were coming out of Stanford, Berkeley, and that they were recruiting from. I was like, well, the pipeline is part of the problem, and then there's some cultural bias that's another part of the problem. There's a bunch of things like that. The point is that was the layer of my humanity that grew when I was in San Francisco. A full recognition that the world was a bigger place, that wasn't all as happy as El Paso. So people talk about San Francisco being in a bubble, and it is. Like in San Francisco, Jeremy can attest to this, in San Francisco, a $12 cup of coffee is a deal. Yeah, because it's non-GMO, organic, and all this other stuff. And it's made, and it takes 45 minutes for the barista to make it, because they're doing magic back there. Something to make you feel good about paying $12 for it. So that's their bubble. But the bubble that El Paso is in is this, that we enjoy this like melting pot, or this cultural diversity, or this cultural acceptance that a lot of places in the world don't enjoy. And so, to some extent, we have to burst our bubble the same way that they should. And we should share that. We should recognize that it's not this way everywhere else in the world. We should champion it. If we have a value proposition to the rest of the world, maybe that's it. Maybe it's showing what diversity can look like and how successful it can be if you just engage with your community differently or whatever. So I think that's something that we should think about and be proud of. And from a technical perspective, we really elevated our thinking around what the role technology should play in the world. I remember going to a city council, they call it board of supervisors there, but basically a city council meeting in San Francisco. We were presenting our budget. It was my first time. I was like 3 weeks on the job, presenting someone else's budget and trying to figure this out. And one of the board members said, in a contextual way, "Why are you being so meek?" And I said, well, that's the last time someone's going to call me meek. And so we really stepped up our strategy and our goals and our vision and our ambition. and we said, we are going to get the entire city connected. We are going to make the mainstream media talk about broadband as a human right and as a utility, and we accomplished that. And that was bold. And we made a lot of progress in New York. And then one Wednesday morning at 6 a.m. Pacific time, 9 a.m. Eastern, I get a phone call from the mayor's office in New York City, and in a coded way they said, hey, we're looking for a CTO. And then, long story short, the mayor called me and said, I'm glad to hear you're our next CTO. So if there's any lesson to you salespeople in here, just sell through the close. Because I didn't know, I'm like, yes, mayor, me too, right? But that has been a phenomenal journey also. I met a lot of great people that worked with me in the city government in San Francisco, and I made a great number of friends in the industry in San Francisco, the CEOs and founders of some of the most notable tech companies on earth were literally across the street from me in San Francisco. My office in San Francisco, literally the window looked out at Travis. Don't hold this against me. Uber's office was literally right out my window, as was Square. Twitter was in the building right next door. So like really in the center of it, and pulled a lot of inspiration and big thinking from that. But I have to tell you, I get to New York, and the scale is entirely different. And if I thought I was bold in San Francisco, I was meek by New York standards. Everything there is to serve 8.5 million people. 5 boroughs. The city's budget is over $90 billion. The IT department's budget is over $1 billion. The IT department alone employs over 1,800 people. The city government of New York City employs about 400,000 people. It's half the size of El Paso. Employed by the city of New York. So the scale is just like it hits you like a brick wall, right? San Francisco was 49 square miles. You could literally walk across town. And then you get to New York, and it's literally, everything in New York is 10 times the size of San Francisco, including the vision and the bold ideas in the vision. And I'll have to tell you, to kind of bring that full circle, another element full circle, I met the second mayor that I ever knew who took technology so seriously, and that's Bill de Blasio. And he gets, and this is not a political statement, none of you are registered voters in New York, I assume. But he kind of has a reputation for being a non-tech mayor. But I have to tell you, in my personal interactions with him, in my conversations with him, he understands what really matters, which is how technology should have an obligation to improve our communities. How it should have an obligation to make our city more inclusive and more equitable, and give more people in every corner of New York City in all 5 boroughs access to opportunity and the ability to participate in modern society and democracy. And if that sounds like I just repeated what I said from the beginning, that's the point. Is for me as a person, and that's come full circle. Now I'm in the biggest city in the country, arguably one of the most important cities, if not the most important city in the world. And that's what I'm charged with. I'm charged with using technology to make our city a better place. And that is super, super important. And I'm really proud of the team. We're constantly focused on that. Our top line mission is about inclusivity and access to opportunity through the way we use technology. It's never for technology's sake. So even though I'm a technologist in my DNA and a guy who started a business and kind of semi-invented an innovation and all that sort of thing, I have like roots in the technical frame. What was a secret motivation for me back then is now the primary motivation today, which is about using this to transform the way people live and how their future looks. So we have 5 core strategic areas in New York City. I'll touch on very briefly. Broadband for all is exactly that. We have to figure out a way to make sure that all 8.5 million New Yorkers and all the businesses that are there have access to affordable, reliable, high-speed internet. We're working on a smart cities and IoT strategy that is open source and open platform to also be able to share this with other cities around the world. We're working on a digital strategy that for me is not about conveniences for people who have iPhones. This is about accessibility for people who have lives. People who have something other to do than stand in line at City Hall waiting for our ability to give them the service that our taxpayers have invested in. So this is about a single mom who no longer has to take an unpaid day off of work and take public transit in order to get access to the programs that we have built for her. Tech talent is the number one. It's like real estate, location. And tech is talent. And industry engagement, and that's what the office that Jeremy runs, which is transforming the way we engage with the biggest, boldest thinkers in the world. How are we as a city going to lean into the conversation around autonomous vehicles and drones and all of those disruptive technologies that are going to happen to us whether we participate or not? And our idea is that if we lean in, we can influence how they are developed so that they are more inclusive from the beginning, instead of trying to regulate it that way in the end. And then I talk about this a lot. You can tell I talk, which is just I'm passionate, apologize. But we've got a bunch of cities around the world looking to us to learn from what we're doing and share with us. We learn back and forth. So we have a very active network of colleagues. So whatever your industry is, I recommend the same because I learn from small town, mid-America, the same way that they learn from us or that we learn from Dubai or Mexico City. And so I think that's been a very important part, kind of back to that theme of mentorship in a professional setting among colleagues. And then we have to also face the reality that New York is huge, and we're not just an influencer, but in some ways a market maker. Right? We have the ability to really, if I call a vendor, they usually call me back. And if I tell them I have this idea for how technology should be directed, they listen. Doesn't mean I drive their strategies, but we have a platform. We have to be responsible with how we use that to shape technology in a way that's inclusive, but also represents as many other cities' goals as possible, because we just have that role, which is part of why we keep such an active conversation with our community. And I know I probably went way over time, and I apologize for that, but thank you very much for...
Great, you get this really cool travel mug.
All right.
Normally, as you know, we have time for Q&A with our speaker, but because we wanted to give him as much time as possible, Miguel, you have a few minutes to stick around if you want to ask any questions. So you're free to stick around and ask him questions, but we don't want to do it official that everybody needs to get back to their busy day. Can we get a picture real quick with the sign right here? They make me do it, so you gotta do it.
All right.
Thank you.
Ernesto?
Yes.
You should ask him the last question.
Yeah, normally, Miguel, our question is
You
how...
can cut the video, people can leave if they need to leave, and I can hang out and ask
Yes.
questions.
Yeah.
But the question
Normally the question we ask is what can we as a community do to help you? But I'll give you kind of an open forum because...
I think it's a matter of, first of all, one of the things I learned in public service that I didn't talk about was it's not all the government's fault, it's ours too. I think when we're really quick to be critical with bits of the information and not take the time and energy to get fully informed and then be supportive the way we need to be of people who are elected publicly. I will tell you, I am, and I don't, this is going to sound wrong maybe, but compared to what I could be doing in the private sector, I'm significantly underpaid. I get paid enough, but by comparison. the level of scrutiny I have to endure is significantly more than I would have to endure in the private sector. So you see how that imbalance, right? So wait a minute, I get paid less, but I'm scrutinized more. If I go over here, I'm scrutinized less and paid more. Most people, unless they're really passionate about what they're doing, don't choose this. And so I think we, as public citizens, taking my government job hat off just as a public citizen, we have to respect that better than we do today. And that's elected officials whose platforms we don't agree with. I think we still owe them respect. And so I think government has a real important role to play, but so do members of the public. And I think that the division can be healed as much by the elected officials as by members of the public, being more respectful of each other than all of those different opinions. So I know that's kind of a conceptual thing and not like a kind of technical takeaway, but I do think that everyone here can, for every gripe you have of city council, find something that you can be pleased with and supportive of. That's because this is a really tough job done by people who really care, whether you realize it or not.
That's a great message spoken as a former student. So we're just going to run through some community announcements right quick. The Hispanic Chamber is continuing their series of sessions on historically underutilized business. The next one is tomorrow, Thursday, October 5th at the Horizon Fire Department at 8 a.m. The following Thursday, October 12th at the Isleta del Sur Pueblo, and it continues on until November 17th at different locations every Thursday. Next, the Intelligent Office and Wells Fargo invite you to discover financial services for your business. That will be held October 5th, 7:30 a.m., 9 a.m. at the Intelligent Office Complex on the west side, 7362 Remcon. Breakfast with friends every Thursday, Carnitas Querétaro, starting at 8:30 on the east side. Next, the El Paso County Economic Development Department and the Downtown Management District present one day, two events. That's Tuesday the 17th, 11 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. is a Texas-based service provider training workshop for property managers, facility managers, contractors, and engineers. And then at 4:30 p.m. here at the Hotel Indigo downtown, a reception for developers, property owners, managers, lenders, and community leaders. Next, here at the Hub, we're having our next workshop seminar, Making Google Work for You. That's Wednesday, October 25th, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. And again, that'll be right here at the Hub where you already are. Next, the New Mexico Watercolor Society is having an event on November 12th at 3 p.m. This is in Las Cruces, but it invites the public to a special program about legal issues pertaining to the world of art, including artists, galleries, collectors, and museums. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for coming out. Again, please, if you have some time, stick around and ask Miguel some questions. Network, come back next week and see us. Apply to present, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.